The fire was burning low, but she hadn't moved. She sat with her back straight, one hand resting on the arm of the old leather chair, the other wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. I'd never seen her look like this before, still, quiet, but with something dangerous simmering just beneath her skin, like she was listening to a conversation no one else could hear. I wrapped a towel around my wrists, still red from the cuffs. "So?" I said carefully. "Federal clearance." She glanced at me, a flicker of amusement passing through her eyes. "Not quite. It's single quotes s. complicated. Try me." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood and walked to the small bookshelf near the fireplace. She pulled down a dusty binder, one I hadn't touched since I inherited the place. She opened it, flipped past old maps, property records, survey diagrams, until she reached a folded piece of parchment with my grandfather's signature on it. She held it up to the firelight. "This," she said, "is what makes all of this matter." I took a step closer. "That's just an old land patent," she nodded. "Yes, but it predates the HOA by over 70 years. And there's a clause in it one almost no one pays attention to. It gives unrestricted rights to whoever holds this land, so long as they can prove bloodline inheritance." "That's me." "Exactly," she smiled. But there was no warmth in it, which means everything Cheryl and her goons did tonight wasn't just overreach, it was criminal trespass. Felony-level interference with sovereign land. I stared at her. "How do you even know that's in there?" "I've been watching this area for months. There's been a pattern. Cheryl's been pushing residents out of older properties, rewriting rules, fabricating violations. But she didn't just want to play dictator, she wanted to buy this cabin." I blinked. "What?" "She submitted a sealed interest offer 2 weeks ago through a shell company. She was counting on your ignorance, betting you'd leave after enough harassment. Once you were out, she'd claim abandonment and get it reassigned." Quietly, legally, almost. The pieces clicked together in my head. The fake notice, the sudden visit, the manufactured urgency. They were trying to break me down fast, before I had time to think, to fight. "But how do you know all this?" I asked. Again, she looked me in the eye, her voice suddenly softer. "Because I used to do what she does, only on a much higher level. Corporate seizures, hostile takeovers, asset suppression. That's what I walked away from." I sat down, stunned. "And now what? What are you doing here?" She knelt by the fire, fed it a fresh log, and watched it catch, undoing what I helped build, one piece at a time. The room fell quiet again. I didn't know whether to feel alarmed or grateful, probably both. But something about the way she moved, how she spoke, it was like watching a chess master pull apart a board piece by piece. She pulled out her phone and connected it to a small satellite modem from her bag. Within seconds, her screen lit up. "I'm submitting a formal complaint to the State Enforcement Board, not local state. They'll bypass the sheriff and send an administrative auditor. Every HOA Cheryl's ever touched is about to get torn open." She typed quickly, documents, photos, maps, times. She had already compiled everything. I looked at the broken door. "She's not going to go quietly. She won't have a choice." The modem chirped. "Submission complete." Then my guest did something strange. She stood up and walked to the center of the room, closed her eyes, and whispered something too low for me to hear. It wasn't English. It sounded old, not religious, not dramatic, just ancient, like a promise being said aloud for the first time in years. "What was that?" She opened her eyes slowly. "Your grandfather made a pact with this land. I just reaffirmed it." I laughed, a little nervously. "You mean spiritually?" "I mean literally," she said, serious. "There are places where paper law ends, and the old law begins. Cheryl tried to claim something that isn't just protected by title but by legacy, that comes with consequences." Before I could ask what kind, headlights appeared through the trees. 2 cars, one black SUV, one county, CRUISER. We watched from the window as they parked near the edge of the cabin. The sheriff stepped out first, all broad, not in a hurry. Behind him came a woman in a blazer, no nonsense, carrying a briefcase. The auditor. My guest opened the door before they could knock. Double quotes, "Ms. Hale," the woman asked, looking at her tablet. "You submitted the complaint?" "I did," she said, gesturing them in. They entered, taking in the broken door, the wrecked porch, and the folded documents still resting on the table. Within 20 minutes, the full report was written, photos taken, my statement recorded. The sheriff was tight but respectful, clearly aware something bigger was at play. The auditor was quicker, asking pointed questions, cross-checking timestamps, even pulling HOA financials from a secure server with alarming speed. When she finished, she looked at me. "You'll be hearing from the Attorney General's office in 2 days. In the meantime, you're authorized to remain here. Your land rights are intact." Then she turned to my guest. "Is there anything else you'd like to add?" My guest shook her head. "No, not yet." They left shortly after. The forest swallowed their vehicles again. Silence returned. I stood at the door, arms crossed, heart still racing. "So what happens now?" My guest looked out into the night. "Now," she said, "we see what Cheryl does when her illusion of power is gone." The next morning, the birds sang like nothing had happened. The sunlight filtered through the pines, throwing long golden shadows across the cabin floor. I stood barefoot on the porch, sipping coffee, watching mist rise off the moss-covered ground. You'd never guess a storm had passed through here unless you looked at the shattered door. My guest had already been awake for hours. She sat near the edge of the clearing, legs folded beneath her, eyes closed, like she was listening again. I didn't interrupt her. I just watched. At 9:12 a.m., the first call came in. It wasn't for me. Her phone buzzed once. She glanced at the screen, then let it ring out. Again, at 9:17, again at 9:23, she's spiraling, she finally said, rising to her feet. Cheryl's trying to pull strings, calling board members, legal advisors, press contacts, but no one's answering. What happens if she fights back? She already did. That's what sealed her fate. She tapped a few times on her phone. The auditor found altered financials in the HOA reserve accounts, redirected payments, falsified maintenance claims. It's all being pulled into a federal inquiry. I whistled low. She's going to burn. My guest didn't smile. She tried to drag others down with her. Bullies never fall quietly. By noon, the emails started coming in. HOA board, members resigning en masse. A lawyer representing 3 former homeowners threatened to file a class action. Someone leaked an audio recording of Cheryl yelling racial slurs during a private board meeting from last fall. Then the knock came. Not like the others, no pounding, no shouting, just a slow, heavy knock. 1, 2, 3. I opened the door. Cheryl stood there alone, the perfect manicure, chipped hair wild. Her expression wasn't one of anger now. It was hollow. I need to talk, she said. I stepped aside without saying a word. My guest stood in the corner of the room, silent. Cheryl looked around like she didn't recognize the place anymore. Her eyes flicked to the broken doorframe, the binder still on the table, and then to me. I didn't know, she said. I didn't know about the clause, or who she was. You didn't care, I replied. She swallowed hard. I just thought this was like the others. A loophole. I've done it before, bought out abandoned lots, flipped old cabins. It wasn't personal, but this one didn't roll over, I said. She looked at my guest. Who are you? My guest stepped forward slowly, meeting her gaze. I'm someone who remembers what people like you try to erase. You've spent years taking what wasn't yours, using fear, lies, paperwork, no one questions. But not this time. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. You were trying to control everything. Cheryl opened her mouth, then closed it again. She suddenly looked much smaller, older, like the mask had finally cracked all the way through, going to be disbarred from any legal affiliation with property governance. My guest continued. You'll likely face charges. At minimum, fraud and conspiracy to falsify municipal documentation. There are already 2 investigators at your HOA office. Cheryl sat down heavily in one of the chairs. It was supposed to be simple. That's always how it starts, I said. Until someone says no. A long silence settled. Then she looked at Manat with hatred, but desperation. What do you want from me? An apology. I shook my head. I don't need anything from you. I just want you gone. She stood slowly, straightened her jacket, and for a second, I thought she might say something decent. Instead, she muttered, you people think you're better, but none of this lasts. Eventually, someone else comes along. My guest raised her eyes. Not if we leave warnings behind. Cheryl froze. Look around, my guest said softly. This land remembers. It always has. Ask the tree roots how many lies are buried out here. Ask the wind why it never quite forgets the names of the cruel. You built your kingdom on silence, but this place doesn't stay silent anymore. Cheryl turned without another word and walked out the door. We didn't follow. An hour later, we heard the sirens in the distance. By evening, it was on the local news. Cheryl Langford, president of the Ridgewood Homeowners Association, under investigation for embezzlement, land misappropriation, and unlawful enforcement practices. Her photo flashed on the screen like a wanted poster. My guest didn't even look up. Instead, she was packing her bag. You're leaving? I asked. She nodded. My part here is done. You're not going to stay. Help clean up the mess. She smiled faintly. You don't need me for that. You know who you are now. That's enough. I stepped forward, something tightening in my chest. Will I see you again? Maybe, she said. If you keep listening to what Chitits glanced toward the trees, the land, the quiet, the truths that don't need lawyers or signatures, just memory. Then she walked out the door, no rush, no sound, and disappeared into the woods as easily as she had arrived. I never asked her real name. I don't think it mattered. That night, I sat alone by the fire. No sirens, no threats. Just the wind, moving through the trees like it had a purpose again. The door was still broken, but the cabin wasn't, and neither was I. The last thing I expected that weekend was trouble. I had just settled into the cabin I'd inherited from my grandfather, a place so deep in the woods, even GPS got lost. No cell towers, no noise, no neighbors within shouting distance. Just trees, mist, and that deep silence you only get when the rest of the world forgets you exist. That was exactly why I came. I lit a fire in the hearth. The cabin creaked and groaned like it was remembering me. I'd only been there once before as a kid, but the smell of cedar walls and old stone brought back everything. I was finally done. With the city, the boardroom battles, the constant thrum of anxiety, this was supposed to be a reset, one I'd earned. But the letter was waiting for me when I arrived. Stuffed in a plastic bag and nailed to the front door? Asterisk, asterisk, notice of non-compliance. Asterisk, 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 unauthorized occupancy of HOA governed property. Asterisk, it was unsigned. No phone number, no contact info, just a cold warning that I wasn't allowed to be there until proper approvals were granted. I crumpled it and tossed it in the fireplace. The cabin sat on private land. No gates, no communal roads. My name was on the deed, and I'd paid off the taxes last spring. Still, I'd heard the local HOA had grown teeth in recent years, especially since that smug little woman Cheryl something had taken over as president. Some people said she ran the area like a private dictatorship, enforcing made-up bylaws and scaring off newcomers. But I didn't care. I wasn't part of their little club. They didn't own me, and they sure as hell didn't own this cabin. I poured a drink, pulled the blanket over my shoulders, and sat back to watch the fire dance. That's when the knock came. It was light at first, almost polite, but I knew that kind of knock, the kind that doesn't mean hello. The kind that's just a prelude. I opened the door slowly, bracing myself. There she was. Cheryl, mid-50s, spray-tanned, with a blazer too sharp for a dirt road and eyes that looked like she'd just smelled something rotting. She didn't smile, just raised an iPad like it was a badge. You can't be here. Evening to you two, I said, leaning against the doorframe. You didn't submit an occupancy request to the Homeowners Association. That's a violation of section. I don't live under your HOA. She blinked. This entire ridge is under association jurisdiction. No, actually, my grandfather's land predates the zoning. We're not included. Check the maps. Her lips pursed into a line. She didn't like that. People like her never do when the rules don't reach as far as their arrogance. I'll need you to vacate until this is cleared up. I laughed, couldn't help it. It's my house. You're the one trespassing. Her eyes narrowed. You'll regret that attitude. She turned and walked away, heels crunching on gravel. I closed the door and locked it, for whatever good that it would do. A few hours passed. I didn't see headlights, didn't hear any engines, just the crackle of firewood and the faint sound of wind breathing through the trees. I was almost beginning to relax again. Then came the knock again, louder, harder this time. It wasn't alone. The door shook on its hinges as a man's voice barked. Open up. This is private security acting under HOA authority. I stood up fast, heart racing. There were two of them, black uniforms, tactical vests, no badges. One had a clipboard, the other a crowbar. My phone had no signal, of course it didn't. I stepped back. This is illegal, I shouted through the wood. You break that door, I'll press charges. They didn't answer. The one with the crowbar stepped forward. Then a voice behind me said, calm and clear, let them come in. I turned around fast. She was standing at the edge of the kitchen, my guest. I'd nearly forgotten she was there. That was kind of her way, quiet, observant, always 2 steps back from the noise. But her presence now felt like a wall. Are you sure? I asked. She nodded once. It's time. I don't even remember unlocking the door, just the sound of splintering wood as they forced it open. The cabin lights flickered as they stormed in, shouting for me to get on the floor. Hands grabbed my arms, forced me down. Cold plastic cuffs bit into my wrists. Cheryl followed them in like she owned the place, smirking like a fox that had finally cornered a rabbit. I warned you, she said. Next time, listen. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. That's when my guest stepped into the firelight, slowly, deliberately. Cheryl turned toward her, still smug. Who the hell are you? My guest didn't answer right away. She simply stepped closer, her eyes never leaving Cheryl's. The room went silent, like the air had thickened somehow. Even the security guys looked uncertain, suddenly unsure who was in charge. Then she smiled. A small, unsettling smile. I'm the reason you're going to remember this night, she said. Every minute of it. Something in Cheryl's expression shifted just slightly, that first flash of doubt. She should have walked away. She didn't. And what happened next? Well, let's just say the forest wasn't the only thing watching. They dragged me out like I was some criminal squatter. My knees scraped against the wood floor, then the porch, then the gravel. The cold cut straight through my clothes. I didn't resist. Not because I was afraid, but because I could see something shifting behind my guest's eyes as she watched. She stood in the doorway, calm as ever, firelight behind her like some ancient figure from a story no one tells out loud anymore. Where's your badge? She asked one of the guards. The one holding the clipboard flinched just slightly, but didn't answer. This is private enforcement, Cheryl said, hands folded like she was hosting a garden party. Under jurisdiction of the Ridgewood HOA, we're well within our rights to detain and remove unauthorized occupants. You broke into a private residence, my guest replied, voice like silk over steel. That makes you a criminal. According to your association, I added, through clenched teeth, I'm trespassing on my own property. Think that's going to hold up in court? Cheryl turned toward me, her face tight with irritation. Your property is under review. The boundary lines are registered, I snapped, on record, with the county. I've got the damn surveys. We have legal grounds. No, my guest cut in. You have ambition. That's not the same thing. For a second, no one moved. The guards shifted uneasily. One of them glanced down the driveway, like he was already thinking about how fast he could get back to his truck. Then Cheryl stepped forward again, leaning in, lowering her voice. You think this is about you? It's not. It's about keeping this area in order. You're the kind of problem that makes people nervous. You don't attend meetings, you don't follow rules, and you bring. She looked over my guest, her gaze sharp with judgment. Company? I felt the heat rise behind my ribs, not from shame, from fury. You should go, Cheryl said to my guest. Whatever you think you're doing, here it's over. My guest took one slow step down the porch. The air changed again, not cold or heavier, like the night itself was leaning in to listen. Would you like to know what's over? She said, voice quiet but carrying. Your career, your reputation, your home, your little throne of fear. All of it. You kicked down the wrong door. Cheryl scoffed, but I saw the tremor in her fingers. You have no idea who you're dealing with, she hissed. My guest raised one eyebrow. Neither do you. Before Cheryl could respond, a sudden buzz cracked through the night static from one of the guards' radios. The man reached for it quickly. Repeat that, he said. A garbled voice came through. Urgent. Get out. We've got a situation possible overreach. The county sheriff's en route. Pull out now. I didn't even try to hide my grin. The guard hesitated, looked at Cheryl. Stand down, she ordered, voice tightening. This is still our jurisdiction. No, my guest said softly. It's not. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. No drama, no performance, just precision. She handed it to the nearest guard. He opened it, read the top, and immediately went pale. She's federal clearance. Cheryl stepped forward, yanking the paper from him. Her mouth moved as she read, but no sound came. Then she looked up at my guest. Real panic finally breaking through the mask. I'm someone you shouldn't have provoked, my guest said, her tone still eerily calm. You stepped outside your lane. Cheryl, you broke laws. You falsified authority. And worst of all, you forgot that not everyone plays by your rules. Cheryl looked around, as if realizing for the first time that the forest around her didn't belong to her HOA, that the ground she stood on didn't care about her title or her clipboard or the fear she used to keep people in line. Uncuff him, the guard said quietly to his partner. They hesitated. Cheryl barked. Don't you dare now, the guard snapped. The cuffs came off with a metallic clink. My wrists throbbed. I stood slowly, brushing the dirt from my sleeves. Cheryl stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore. Maybe she never really saw me to begin with, just a threat to her little empire. You're finished, she said, but the words came out hollow. No, I said. You are. My guest turned back toward the cabin. You should leave now, all of you. Cheryl didn't move. Her jaw clenched. Her hands shook. You don't have a choice, my guest added. You'll want to be gone before the real law shows up. The guards moved first, backed away, avoiding eye contact. Cheryl stood there a moment longer, as if trying to summon one last ounce of control, but there was none left. She turned, and followed them into the darkness, disappearing down the winding gravel path. We stood there a long moment after they left. The woods were quiet again, but different, not peaceful. Charged. I looked at my guest. Who are you really? She didn't answer, just looked up at the stars. Let's go inside, she finally said. It's about to get a lot more interesting. We stepped back into the cabin. I shut the broken door as best I could, and we sat by the fire again, this time not for comfort, but to wait, because she was right. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning.